Hello, and welcome to the first video in a series about car repair and maintenance, the basics. So, I'm going to start off today with teaching you about the basic set of tools and machines that you should have to do basic mechanical work. So, first thing, one of the most important, is a jack. So, a jack will lift up your car and keep it in the air. And these are important because the spare tire jack that comes with your car isn't really good for actual mechanical work because they usually aren't very stable, nor are they very safe. So if you're putting any sort of sideways load on it, like trying to pull a part off of your car, you could end up tipping it to the side and your car could fall off the jack or tip over, which we don't really want. So you want a hydraulic jack for that. Don't use a spare tire jack, trust me, just don't. Anyways, along with the jack, something that I got in a kit with these jack stands, another important piece, that they're not strictly necessary, but certainly very, very useful, and usually you can get a sort of combo deal, like I got a really cheap jack and jack stands from Advanced Auto for about $50. It's probably one of the most expensive things you would have to buy, but some parts stores will also rent you equipment, which is always an option. But jack stands will keep parts of the car elevated after you've jacked them up. So you jack it up, you slip a jack stand in somewhere, usually on a part of the frame. That's also what you usually use to jack up your car. And that'll then keep the car in the air. And they're also a lot more stable than a hydraulic jack. So you can have one entire side of the car, front, back, left, right, whatever, up in the air at one time, which is very useful. And it basically means you won't have to buy more than one jack. Next, we have a Haynes manual. Now, these go by several names: Haynes, Bentley, repair manuals, whatever. There's a variety of names for them. But basically, they will outline basic repair procedures, and one of the most important things they have in them is what's called torque specifications. Now, sometimes you have to tighten up bolt or fastener to a certain level. This is because it applies a specific amount of pressure, which keeps things from becoming loose while also not putting too much pressure and cracking whatever you're removing or replacing, as well as preventing it from functioning incorrectly. Like, for example, the valve cover here, when you tighten down the bolts that go around the perimeter of the valve cover, you have to tighten them down to a specific amount, because if you tighten them too much, you push up parts of the valve cover that don't have bolts on them, and if you tighten it too little, then you're just creating a leak. So there are really two types of torque wrenches that you're going to need. These are what tell you the amount of torque that you'd apply. You could really get either one. You can get a click type torque wrench, which is what this is, or you can get a metered one. These come in digital or analog. And these are really important because if you're doing anything sort of more complex, even like tightening down your wheels, usually there's a torque specification of some sort for that. So it's always good practice to sort of follow torque specifications, so you really should have a pair of these, but although they're not strictly necessary, they are highly recommended. Next, you want somewhere to put bolts and fasteners. I use like just assorted cardboard boxes. You're probably going to want to have more than one because you don't always want to cross-contaminate bolts. Like, for example, you don't want to put a bolt that's from the cooling system in where a bolt from your engine, some oil or something like that would go, because you don't want to get oil in the cooling system, but that's a whole different thing. So have somewhere to put everything that you take off and organize it. Trust me, organize it. Next, basic set of wrenches. Depending on your car, its age, and what country makes it, you will have either metric or imperial, or even a mix of the two. So my car is German, so it's got metric measurements for most of the bolts and fasteners. So I have a metric set of wrenches. And basically the reason you want these is sometimes there's a place where you can't really get a socket set into. It's a bit too cramped, a bit too tight. Also, you don't want to use a socket set for really high amounts of pressure. Really, if you got a really stuck bolt, you don't want to use a socket set for that because you can break the socket wrench. So, good set of wrenches. Just a basic set. Next, we have the socket set itself. Trust me when I say this, and I say this from experience, don't buy the cheapest set you can find. The experience I had with that lasted me probably about 3 weeks until all the sockets literally split in half down across the edges. So I pretty much just threw that out and got a better kit. This one I would recommend. It's from the brand Gear Wrench. I believe you can also pick it up at Advance Auto. You don't really have to use Advance Auto either. You can use really any auto parts store or even order all your things online. I just use Advance Auto because it's closest to me. But good socket set. This is, next to the jack, probably one of the more essential items that you're going to want. I realize a lot of you might already have these items in your home. Most people will have that, along with another important piece, screwdrivers. You're going to want a set of screwdrivers and a hammer. Hammers, sometimes things need a little bit of persuasion to come off. I'm pretty sure that's self-explanatory. Don't use hammers on things that are fragile. They're only for getting solid pieces of metal, other solid pieces of metal. That's all they're for. Alright, next, magnetic pickup tool. This isn't really a necessity, more of something that's cheap and easy to get, and also comes very useful in certain situations. Like if you drop a bolt down into your engine bay or down another hole, or it falls through somewhere where you can't reach it, you're going to want one of these. And trust me when I say, you want to have this when you need it. Like you can get one of these really cheap from any hardware store or parts store for like $10, $5. They're cheap. Next, you have a pair of shop gloves. These, again, aren't really a necessity, but nice to have because you don't always want your hands getting really dirty. They also protect you from some level of heat and burning, and also cuts and bruises. They help a lot with that. You can get just like regular gloves, like sort of work gloves. I also use a box of latex disposable gloves because those are fluid proof, so like coolant, water, oil, things like that don't go through them. If you get any of that on them, you just take them off and replace them with a new pair. So that's nice. Last on my list of things you really should have, actually second to last, are zip ties. If you break a plastic fastener of some sort, you can usually attach whatever you need to back on with zip ties. Like, for example, on my car in particular, just wait for me to focus. This little hose right here has a plastic fastener which broke off, but I've got that held on pretty well with a zip tie. The fan shroud over here, the last mechanic to work on this, he broke a lot of the clips for the fan, and he also broke my fan shroud. I've still got to get a replacement for that. And so I've got that attached on with some zip ties as well, which are holding well. So you don't want to use zip ties for anything that are structural, as in really important to the structure of the car itself, load bearing, things that have a lot of weight put on them. Like, for example, don't zip tie your shocks together or zip tie them to your car. I'm saying that from experience. Don't do it, all right? So when you start out, you might end up making a couple mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but trust me when I say, as long as you start out small, the mistakes that you may make will be usually easily repairable and not all that major. Like, for example, you might be changing your oil and forget to put the sealing washer, which basically acts as sort of extra sealing barrier between the oil and the outside of the car to keep it from leaking out. Worst thing that happens is you have to drain the oil that you already put into the engine back out, put the sealing washer on, put the drain plug, which is just a bolt that goes into the bottom of the engine so you can drain out oil, and put everything back together. So starting out small, mistakes will be rather minor, but a few tips that I have are, before doing anything, don't just research, don't just jump in as soon as you think you have a problem. You want to do some research, all right? So, like, for example, let's say I get a code on my engine. You also might want to get a code reader. A lot of these are things that you should or might want, but don't need. A code reader, basically, you can plug it into a special port on your car, usually underneath your dashboard, that basically reads the car's computer, and it tells the little machine what's sort of wrong, like what's triggered a fault code in the car's computer saying something's not really the way it's supposed to be, so here's a warning. That's what actually happens when you get a check engine light. Code has been triggered. So like, let's say I have a code saying I have a vacuum leak somewhere. A vacuum leak is basically a leak somewhere between your air filter and your airflow sensor, which measures the amount of air going into the engine, and the engine itself. So basically, this, with most cars which have fuel injection, which delivers a metered amount of fuel per the amount of air coming in, this measures the amount of air coming in. So if you have additional air getting in anywhere along the line, then that can throw off the precise timing and mixture of fuel that goes in. So on top of that, so let's say that I get a code saying I have a leak somewhere, and I read online after looking through some forums that, it's most likely this little box here that has a leak in it. So I don't want to go out and just immediately and buy a new sealing ring or gasket for this box. I want to make sure that's the source of my problem. Just because somebody else's problem is similar to yours and they found a solution doesn't mean it's going to be the same solution that you will need. That's very important. But before doing any sort of repair, you want to do lots of research. You want to make sure you have everything, and you want to have the replacement parts ready. Don't start replacing things before you have parts. Shop around for parts as well. Don't just go buy from the first place you see. Usually you can get a better deal somewhere else. And also, for a lot of cars, common cars, there will be guides available on the internet even that people who are very helpful will have created, basically outlining steps, usually more detailed even than a repair manual, like the ones I mentioned earlier, that tell you what you need to do, what you need, and any issues you might find along the way, which the repair manuals won't always tell you about. But the next thing is, being in the northeast of the country, we use a lot of salt on our roads, so rust can be a problem, which is why something that isn't really necessary but you will want at some point most likely is this, which is what's called a breaker bar, cheater bar. It goes by many different names, but I just call it a breaker bar because what this is for is this has the same end as a socket, a square end you can put sockets onto, but it doesn't ratchet. It's a solid piece of metal. This is used for breaking loose stuck bolts. You don't want to use this on small bolts, only really big ones that are really stuck, because if you use it on one that's too small, you might end up breaking it. And that's not fun. But again, even if you make mistakes, if your car had a problem in the first place and you make a mistake while fixing it, worst case scenario is you take it to a mechanic, which you would have ended up doing in the first place. More things you might want: a set of Allen keys for a lot of compact cars and even SUVs sometimes. You might need some of these. What I personally prefer is a set of Allen sockets for a ratchet. But again, these are getting into the expensive range of tools and things that you can get. But basically, basics that you really kind of need are wrenches, socket set, a jack and some jack stands, a torque wrench, and a repair manual. And basically most of the other things you'll already have in your house. Pretty much all of you will already have that. And these are really the core things that you need. You can get, usually you can get the whole set of these things for $100, $150 max. But again, you don't always want to go with the cheapest thing. You want to make sure what you're getting is a quality product because, well, unless you only really need it once. If you only need the tool once, then whatever, get the cheapest one. If you're going to be using it more than once, make sure you get a quality product, because eventually the amount of money you're saving by buying the cheaper one will be offset by the amount of items you actually buy. Yeah, that's it. In the next part, I'm going to be going over basic maintenance, things that you can do really without many tools at all. Things that you should check on a daily basis. Well, not daily, but things you should check on a semi-regular basis. Yeah.